Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here with the dag end of the Outsiders and ideally first dog on the moon.
We've just got to look at this and say, do you want to just use this issue? And when we talk about mental health of gay people, I feel very sorry for them because this is, if there's no plebiscite, it'll get worse. It'll just go on and on and on. There will be no change to the Marriage Act in this government if there's no plebiscite. I can tell you that now.
Do you think, Rick, that comparison is apt, the Republic one, and then yes, that caused that referendum was lost and the issue vanishes?
No, I mean, this issue will never vanish. It's been reaching a crescendo now for the last 7 years or so. Having said that, I mean, I totally understand why Labor has taken so long, even though it's been annoying for them to make a decision on this because they are stuck. I mean, they are damned either way they go on this. The plebiscite, as Brandis pointed out the other day, is at the moment probably the surest way of getting something done on this issue in the next year. But the way the plebiscite is set up and the fact that it costs $200 million and the fact that it isn't binding and there will be taxpayer-funded arguments for hate, essentially, and I know exactly what that hate feels like, that is not a good option either. So we're kind of in this stasis, and I don't know what the outcome is going to look like.
It's worth also pointing out that there was a recent Melbourne University study that showed that there was only one electorate in the entire country that has a clear majority against same-sex marriage.
That poll was done by ABC viewers online. That is not a correct poll. But I have no doubt the plebiscite will pass. And I think that the best thing everyone could do is just get it over with and get it done. Because quite frankly,
we have to have one first, and that perhaps is up to forces other than the government. But we'll see that tomorrow. Thanks to our outsiders, Rick Morton, Anne Henderson, Fatima Measham. And after some weeks hiatus, yes, I can tell you now, First Dog, he's back.
Hello, patriots. Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm Walkley Award-winning political cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. In lounge rooms and pubs and boardrooms across the nation, Australians are all gathered anxiously around the wireless, just like you are now, listeners. Everyone waiting breathlessly for a sign, for the gleam at the end of the tunnel. Is it finally going to happen? Will it soon be over? Is Tony Abbott going to be Prime Minister again? Please let it be true. A nation clutches its pearls in hope.
Breaking news, this just in. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, recently appointed head of the Cluster Bomb Institute for the Advancement of Western Civilization, has, according to some reports, told a think tank audience that he intends to be Prime Minister again. Just moments later, Mr. Abbott immediately denied suggestions that he intends to be Prime Minister again. And we all know what it means when he denies something. It means it is completely true. And Tony Abbott intends to be Prime Minister again.
And let me tell you, Australia needs him. There's a shopping list of challenges facing the country that Prime Minister Abbott will need to shirt front. Malcolm clearly isn't up to it. Here at the First Dog on the Moon Institute, we've compiled the top 5 nation-threatening things Tony will need to wrestle into submission once he's gotten into his commemorative Malaysian flag, budgie smugglers, and covered himself in olive oil. Nation-threatening thing number 1, the same-sex marriage plebiscite. It's a disaster. The horrid little thing is scampering about the nation, frightening the fundamentalists. It's so bad, Christians might even be forced to bake wedding cakes for lesbians. Next, we'll be expecting taxi drivers to pick up Aboriginal people. Tony Abbott's just the man to take the same-sex marriage plebiscite down behind the God-fearing woodshed and put it out of our misery. Number 2, the nation needs Tony Abbott to save us from renewable energy, which A, almost destroyed Adelaide, although how could they tell? B, threatens our non-renewable energy security somehow apparently. C, causes politicians to make stuff up on telly and ignore science. And D, worst of all, end our very way of life by turning decent Aussie kids into gay married, doll-bludging, Muslim twittering Kardashianistas. Number 3, Tony has to save us from the NBN because, like the deficit nobody talks about, the Labor Party have made the national broadband network fat and lazy, even though they haven't been in government for years. We need someone to take the NBN by the scruff of the neck and give it a sound thrashing with a stick. Sounds like a job for a man with the initials Tony Abbott. And number 4, George Brandis. Maybe misleading Parliament, maybe kind of making things up, growing more and more useless every day. And what is Malcolm Turnbull doing about it? Nothing. And if Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, what would he do about it? All right, maybe that's not a good example. Number 5, the inquiry into the banks. Would Tony Abbott force the CEOs of the Big Four to submit to a humiliating inquisition, drag them into Parliament and make them justify their greedy, rapacious behaviour in some kind of humiliating fat cat circus, and then do nothing about unethical behaviour in the banking sector anyway? No. Tony Abbott would not. He would just cut to the chase and do nothing about unethical behaviour in the banking sector anyway, without going to the trouble of an inquiry. Far more efficient, and frankly, that's the kind of leadership the nation needs. Hang in there, Australia. I'm sure Tony will be back soon. I can guarantee it, or I'm not Luke Beveridge. You're welcome, Australia.
Sons of the stray, red, white, and blue. We will come up smart.
Yes, of course, First Dog has a particular interest in the Western Bulldogs football team. As do we all, let's face it. That's it for Sunday Extra this week. Don't forget the podcast. It's on our website.
Okay, well, I'm not in pod, so I will forget about the podcast. That's why I record the free-to-air Radio National frequency modulated broadcast. And I know they podcast it, but let's face it, they don't have my scenery as a visual backdrop to the discussion. And they don't get my Warblerant on their podcast version of it either. That's why there are apparently 20 or 30 or sometimes even 40 of you scattered around the world who actually pay attention to this. Hasn't it been an amazing week watching the American election? Or perhaps erection might be a better way of looking at it. Donald Trump's just shown his scaffolding, hasn't he? Eh? One of the worst things my father used to say about another male was to call him a low-hound. I think Donald Trump is kind of the epitome of a low-hound. Because a low-hound is a man who's just like a dog, and a dog is utterly helpless, has to go sniffing at the tail of any bitch the dog thinks is in heat. And Donald Trump, just like 11 years ago when he was like, let's see, he's older than Hillary Clinton, isn't he? Like, he's about 72. So back when he was in his early 60s, he was boasting and bragging to his mates about how he used to grab women by the pussy and try to fuck married women. And this is a matter of months after he married his third wife, or is it the fourth? The one he's got now. And of course, she's forgiven him for it. But somehow he reckons it's wrong for Hillary Clinton to have forgiven Bill Clinton for all of his sexual misdemeanors while he was at the White House. And for some reason, Bill Clinton's supposed to be a big, wicked, evil standout, almost child molester is how they're portraying him, because he had an interlude with was it 18 or 19-year-old intern, somebody about the same age as his own daughter. Have you ever heard or seen a bit of film where Marilyn Monroe sings "Happy Birthday, Mr. President"? It's a black and white film clip because it dates back to when Kennedy was alive, but it is absolute sort of sex on a stick wrapped in candy floss, you know. And apparently it was made after Marilyn Monroe had several midnight assignations with John F. Kennedy in the White House. I mean, he's been dead since I was just barely out of nappies. So it's considered semi-normal among the American power elites to just kind of accept the fact that a lot of the people who are successful in business and politics are men, and a lot of the men who are successful in business and politics are constantly trying to prove something to themselves. And they do that by conquering new ground, hunting for fresh pelt. As soon as they actually wake up next to a new woman, they get a bit bored with it, you know, and they want to move on and play the rest of the field. And if they're rich enough and they can afford to pay people to shut up, then they get away with it. But, you know, once upon a time, the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Abrahamic society that the Western world claims to embrace and embody put a fairly high value on celibacy and monogamy and faithfulness and chastity. And it's very interesting the way the American business culture has apparently embraced the idea that a Western businessman can demonstrate his economic power and skills by having a couple of sweet young things bobbing up and down at his elbow, one pace behind and to the right, another one pace behind and to the left, giggling at whatever he says. It's like it's part of the image. You know, you've got to have these little decorations. Otherwise, nobody takes the great man seriously, apparently. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with Trump having shown himself to be a low-hound. And, yeah, as they mentioned on the Outsiders, somebody has been hanging on to this, waiting for the final month before dumping it. Let him make a fool of himself 79 different other ways and then come up with this. You know, he's been denying that he has misogynistic attitudes, despite all of the horrible things he said about any woman who ever disagreed with him. And now this comes out. Yeah, I reckon he probably should be taken off the ticket, but you can't expect the American Republican Party to do the right thing because they are kind of obsessed with not losing face, and they're kind of obsessed with trying to win. And like, what are they going to do? Send people in there with a blank ballot paper and tell them to write the name of their favourite Republican on it? That'd be interesting. That really would be interesting. 340 million Americans, can enough of them write intelligibly without making a misspelling or a misstatement to have a write-in ballot and expect to win? I mean, a pencil hasn't got spelling correct, and have you ever tried reading the bastards in the comment threads, the way they omit all forms of punctuation and capitalisation, and then they misspell everything else and use it in the wrong context? Yeah, I wouldn't trust the Americans to have a write-in ballot and expect anything decisive to happen. You heard a few interesting ballot stories. Apparently the Hungarians had a vote on whether they were going to pay attention to the European Union's quota system of allocating refugees to various member countries. The Hungarians voted 94% against accepting the European Union's quota system. Trouble is only 44% turned out to vote. So therefore the referendum, which otherwise apparently would have been carried, is declared invalid because not enough people showed up. Colombia had peace talks getting ready to end a 50-something year war. I mean, 90% of the people in Colombia weren't alive to remember what peace was. They had a referendum, will we agree with this? And only, I think 40% of the population turned up to vote. And by 0.5% or something, the no side won. So therefore they've voted to go back to having a war because it's what they're fucking used to. Oh dear, I remember when there was only 3.5 billion idiots on the planet. Now there's 7.5. The population of idiots per square foot has doubled. It's just... And apparently, if you own any English money or anything valued in English money, you just lost 27% of your total net worth in the last week because the English pound fell off a cliff, apparently as a result of the Brexit decision. So yeah, it's been an interesting week. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. We are on the upload limit. Ciao.